Thank you so much, Stevie, and to Wellness Within for having me. And thank you all for coming. I'm excited to be here today. And I'm just going to say I apologize if you hear a dog barking in the background on occasion. If there's any mail truck that enters my court, the dog goes nuts. So I apologize. I try to keep him in the other room, but he's very loud. So I am Erin. I run the Peaceful Belly, and I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner. So I essentially help people kind of figure out ways to eat better for health, and also kind of finding what works best for your body, because all of us are different. So some of us require different things, but there are some obvious baseline dietary things that we can all do to optimize health and optimize our digestion. So today I'm just going to kind of explain to you how the digestive process works. You may find that some of it gets a little bit in the weeds and may seem a little confusing. Don't worry, you don't have to remember all of these details. It's just to put things into context. So if you have any questions about the way I'm describing it as it goes, just put them in the chat and we will definitely address those. But I just want to make sure it kind of all makes sense. So you may hear words or descriptions that seem a little bit like, whoa, that's pretty sciencey, but it's just to kind of explain the whole process. So, but basically every cell in the body depends on the digestive system for nutrients needed to run smoothly. And so what I want to discuss with you guys today is how digestion is really a north to south process. So we're going to kind of go over what that means. And then also why a healthy gut microbiome matters. And then some dietary and lifestyle tips that I can give to you guys to maybe implement to help optimize digestion and to really feed your good gut bugs. Because I'm sure you've heard a lot about the gut. It's kind of becoming a big deal and in the medical field, and how it's kind of connected to everything in our bodies and in our health. So that is where we are going today. So firstly, when I say digestion is a north to south process, what I mean by that is that digestion really starts in the brain. So when we're thinking about food, seeing our food, smelling our food, that is already starting our bodies to prep for digestion and prep for taking food into the body and starting to break it down. So the brain signals to the mouth and the salivary glands that feeding time is approaching. Basically, our brains set the stage for everything that then happens further south. So when we put food into our mouths, we're breaking it up, we're swishing it around with saliva, which starts to initiate the breakdown of carbohydrates, and it's letting the stomach know that food is on the way. So it also causes our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system, to increase in activity. And we'll discuss more about the different, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems in a bit. But the parasympathetic is our rest and digest. So once our food is chewed up properly, it is passed to the stomach. And you can kind of think of the stomach as like the quality control center for the entire system. So when that mass of food that we've just chewed up enters the stomach, the stretching sensation and the presence of protein in our foods signal to specific cells in the stomach to start producing stomach acid or hydrochloric acid. And so basically, sufficient levels of hydrochloric acid in our stomach are essential for the stomach to complete its three primary jobs, which are: one, to disinfect our food, because when we're eating and drinking anything, you have to think that there are little critters on our food and in our water that can come into our bodies through food and water. So one of the things that having adequate stomach acid does is it kills off any pathogens or little critters that come in on our food and water. So we want to have adequate amounts of that stomach acid to kind of clean the food up. Secondly, it helps to break down proteins, because if you think about it, you're eating a big piece of chicken and that's coming in a big dense form of protein. Well, you need that acidic environment to break those proteins up into amino acids that the body can actually absorb. And then thirdly, it helps release certain nutrients from the food. So HCl is critical for the absorption of certain vitamins and minerals like B12. The stomach, sorry, let me go back. The stomach works kind of like a really hot washing machine. So it's churning and burning the food until it turns into like a paste that is acidic enough to be passed to the upper part of the small intestine. And so one thing I want to really highlight here is the level of acidity in the stomach is so important for the rest of that digestive process to take place. Because if our stomach isn't acidic enough, it doesn't actually prompt the body to move the food farther south. We'll come back to HCl more and more in this webinar, but just know that this step is really important and can play a major role in digestive symptoms like bloating, gas, and that like feeling of fullness. So we will definitely come back to this. So then once the stomach kind of shuttles that massive food to the small intestine is kind of like the body's kitchen. So it's where we prepare the food to be absorbed and become part of us. So 95% of the absorption of nutrients, water, and electrolytes happens in the small intestine. So the small intestine will also recruit the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas to help with this job. So think of these accessory organs like station chefs in your kitchen. So they're working on specific jobs in the same kitchen at the same time in order to complete the absorption of your meal. So the liver makes the bile, which helps to emulsify or break down fats. And then the liver will then pass that bile to the gallbladder. And the gallbladder's job is to just hold on to that bile until fat is present in the small intestine, and it will let it out to emulsify the fat. So it's kind of like, bile is almost like putting dish soap on a dirty pan to break up that fat. So then the pancreas has a couple of different jobs. So one, it helps to neutralize the food so that it is not too acidic for the lining of the small intestine, because the stomach is able to handle that acidity based on how it's made up, but the small intestine is a lot more sensitive. So the pancreas comes in and it makes that mass of food a lot less acidic so that the small intestine lining doesn't get burned by the acidity. And then the pancreas also secretes enzymes that help to break up the fat and the protein and the carbohydrates into smaller molecules. So to recap, the acidic mass of food comes from the stomach into the small intestine, where it's neutralized by the pancreas, so it won't burn that intestinal lining. And then the pancreas releases enzymes to break down the macronutrients, which is fat, protein, and carbohydrates, while the gallbladder releases bile to simultaneously emulsify fats so that all those tiny food particles can be absorbed into the body. So I know that's like kind of confusing, but essentially it's like the small intestine, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are kind of all working together to break down all of those fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So they're tiny molecules that then can be absorbed into the body. So any food that can't be digested by our bodies, so those are like fibers from vegetables, seeds and beans, for example, resistant starches like green bananas, jicama, cold potatoes, rice, oats, and beans, and then polyphenols like berries, flax seeds, coffee, green tea, cocoa powder, along with some water. All of that moves from the small intestine into the large intestine through what's called the ileocecal valve. And you can think of this as it's like a jail cell door that will prevent the food from going back into the small intestine once it's reached the large intestine. So once that food goes from the small intestine into the large intestine, that ileocecal valve closes so that it can't go back in. So although 90% of water has already been absorbed in the small intestine, the large intestine's primary job is to absorb water from that indigestible food, absorb the electrolytes like sodium and chloride, and then some digestible vitamins. And then the microbes, or our good gut bugs that live down there in the large intestine area, feed on the indigestible foods to make different vitamins that our bodies need, like vitamin K, B vitamins, and also short chain fatty acids, which are vital for intestinal health. So then the feces is compacted in the colon and eliminated. So that's essentially kind of the north to south process of it all. So if you think about how that all works, if it starts in our brains, if we are starting our meal, like say you're running out the door to get to an appointment and you grab a bar and a banana and you're eating on the go and you're stressed out because you're racing to this job, you are not in a parasympathetic state. You're not in your rest and digest state. You're in a sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight state. And a really important thing to remember in our bodies is that when our body perceives stress or a threat, it doesn't know the difference between whether you're being chased by a dog or you're late to a meeting. To the body, stress is stress. So if you are eating in a state where you're like unsettled and you're racing to something, or you're watching a really scary show and your heart rate is up, your body perceives that as a stressor, and it's in the sympathetic state, the fight or flight state. And when the body is in that state, it can't do anything else. It prioritizes survival. So essentially, it shuts everything else down. So that's why it's so important to really take the time to sit down and schedule your meal and relax and allow yourself to get into a comfortable state and to not be on the go when you're eating. Because if you are, basically your digestion is not functioning. It's the food's just going in and sitting in there because everything else is shutting down, if that makes sense. And we're going to talk about that more in our tips, but I just wanted to explain to you that if you're starting from that place and digestion starting in the brain, if you think about that, all of the cascade effects and all the different steps that the body has to go through in the digestive process kind of gets halted because you started out in that state. So that's something to really think about when you're eating. It's really kind of, it's supposed to be a very peaceful kind of like peaceful, relaxed time. Like we used to do that, right? We used to sit around at the table as a family and laugh and have conversation and eat while we're chatting. And it's very, relaxed and kind of we're taking our time. And in this day and age, I feel like we're just go, 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 run, run, run. And oftentimes we're not sitting down and really thinking about our food, smelling our food, and sitting with our meal. All right. So now talking about a healthy microbiome. So I'm sure you guys have heard about what the microbiome is, but essentially it's just a bunch of bacteria. And did you know that the majority of your body is bacteria? Yes, you heard that correctly. The body is made up of 10 times more microbial cells than human cells. And 95% of that microbiome of bacteria resides in your gut. Also, every single person's microbiome is different. So it's your personal genetic footprint that helps determine your DNA, your predisposition to certain diseases, and which foods work well for your body and which foods don't, and so much more. This community of critters are all different and all serve a purpose in order to keep our bodies in balance. So if you almost think about it, it's almost like a rainforest. You have all these different creatures and plants and animals, and they kind of coexist. And some are poisonous and some are really good for you, but they all find a way to kind of live together and coexist in this environment. And your gut microbiome is that way too. When we find issue with that is when dysbiosis happens. And what I mean by that is when you have an imbalance in your gut bugs. So like the opportunistic or the not so good bugs start to take over for the bad bugs. And that's when you start to see issues with digestive dysfunction, inflammation, and disease. Sometimes it can cause, brain problems and skin problems and all kinds of stuff. So we'll go into that. But here are a few things to think about when we think of microbiome integrity. So 80% of our immune system resides in and around our microbiome, or our gut microbiome. So essentially, our microbiome and our immune system are really close neighbors, and they're constantly communicating and working together to keep invaders out of the neighborhood. So a healthy gut means a healthy immune system. When one becomes weak or compromised, so does the other. So allergy symptoms, frequent colds, infections like yeast infections, ear, bladder, skin, lung, sinus infections, itchy skin, rashes, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders. These are all signs that the immune system is working overtime and that it's fatigued. And based on the close relationship with our gut microbiome, It's probably no surprise to you by now that most of these symptoms are also indicative of a compromised gut garden. Many important neurotransmitters are created in the gut. So 90% of serotonin and 50% of dopamine. And these neurotransmitters have a significant impact on our mood, energy levels, sleep, motivation, and brain function. Also, the gut microbiome is intimately connected to our brains via the vagus nerve. So think of this like a direct highway from your gut to your brain. And so imbalance in the gut can have a direct impact on brain imbalance and vice versa. So sometimes mood disorders like anxiety, depression, and even memory loss can greatly improve with healing the gut microbiome or the gut and increasing fiber and more plants in the diet. So things that impact a healthy microbiome are stress levels, and stress can be, diet, stress can be family issues, stress can be work, it can be not sleeping well enough. So stress levels, quality of sleep, the foods we eat, bacteria you're exposed to on a daily basis, toxins in our cleaning supplies, lifestyle choices, these can all directly impact the harmony of the microbiome. And so many of us are missing important strains of good gut flora. So think of these like the flowers in your gut garden, which allow the weeds or not so good gut bacteria to take over the garden, as we were talking about earlier. So knowing all of this and how important, the north to south process is, and how important it is to really foster our good gut bugs and keep that gut microbiome nice and healthy, I'd like to also talk about ways that we can optimize our digestion and encourage those flowers in our gut garden to grow. So tip number one, this seems very basic, but tip number one that I have for you is eat real food. And so what I mean by this is what we eat literally becomes us. It's the fuel that keeps the body running optimally. So imagine if your body was a car. Would you put juice in the gas tank and expect it to run? Our bodies recognize real food as energy. They know what to do. The body knows what to do with a piece of grilled chicken and some broccoli and a sweet potato. So when we eat things like fried foods, sugar, packaged snacks that have like a laundry list of ingredients, our bodies don't know what to do with that. It's like foreign, it's like chemicals. Over time, these foods create digestive distress, inflammation in the body. They disrupt our gut microbiome. And just so you know, the weeds in our garden feed off of sugar and refined carbohydrates and fried foods. Cancer feeds off of sugar, refined carbohydrates, and fried foods. So my rule of thumb, if you don't know what an ingredient is, your body doesn't either, so it's not food. So I encourage you to take charge of your own health by knowing what's in your food. And one of the best ways to do this is to cook at home. And I know for some of you that is a lot, and it can be very taxing, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So as I said earlier, it can really just be a piece of grilled chicken, some steamed broccoli, and a sweet potato. I mean, you're getting all of the nutrients right there that you need. And so one of the best ways to do that is to think about having a macronutrient balanced dish. And what I mean by that is you want to have some healthy protein, a little bit of healthy fats, and carbohydrates. And when I say carbohydrates, I'm talking about vegetables and fruits, primarily non-starchy veggies. You really can't eat enough of them. They are so good for you. And as I said earlier, every body is different. Some people really find that they do a lot better with more protein in their diet. And some people find that they need a little bit of extra healthy fat, like avocado oil or olives and coconut oil. So whatever, I encourage you to kind of experiment with your own plate and see what makes you feel the most energized and what feels good in your body. But I always try to encourage people to have at least the majority of your plate be plants, because that's the best nourishment for our bodies. All right, so tip number 2, drink water with a pinch of sea salt. So water is the most important nutrient in our body. You can survive 8 weeks without food, but only days without water. Staying properly hydrated is absolutely necessary for digestive function. It helps the body flush toxins, it removes waste, it hydrates all of the cells in our body, and it transports nutrients from our food into our cells. But the key to proper hydration is to have the presence of electrolytes with the water. So think of electrolytes as the key that unlocks the cell so the water can actually go inside and hydrate as opposed to just kind of running over the top. So if you were to go to a natural spring and drink the water from a natural spring, because of the soil and everything of where the spring water is coming from, it already has those electrolytes in it. But in our day and age, everything's filtered. So while we're filtering out the bad, we're also filtering out the good. So in order to be able to replace those electrolytes and get that that true proper hydration, you can just put a pinch, just a little pinch of refined, like unrefined sea salt in your water. So my favorite brand is Redmond Real Salt. And just so you guys know, you're going to get all of these tips with the information at the end in a electronic. So if you don't get all this stuff written down, don't worry, because it's coming to your email. But yeah, so you can do the pinch of sea salt. Coconut water is a great form of electrolytes. And there's also something called trace mineral drops. So it's kind of a personal preference, but I find that the pinch of sea salt is just really easy because most of us have unrefined sea salt around anyway when we're cooking. Okay, tip number 3, before eating, relax. So we kind of covered this earlier in the digestive process, talking about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. But our bodies are basically designed to be in a relaxed state when eating in order for digestion to actually occur. And when we're eating on the go in a stress state or distracted by screens, our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight part of the autonomic nervous system, is triggered. And so our bodies prioritize survival, as we talked about. So basically, smell your food. Take 5 to 10 deep belly breaths. Make sure you're not distracted by work or a project that you're working on, racing to the next thing on your to-do list or playing on your phone. So this is so hard. And trust me, I feel like I work on this daily because, you know, our world is just go, go, go. We're moving quick. And so I challenge you to practice, like try to do this, almost schedule it as a time, like a meeting that you would take for yourself. And so this kind of goes into the next tip. These next 3 tips are kind of connected, but I felt like they needed to be separated for explanation. So tip number 4 is chew 20 times, at least 20 times before swallowing. So the saliva, as we talked about earlier in the north to south process, our saliva works in conjunction with the teeth to start that initial phase of breaking down our food. And so chewing each bite at least 20 times allows us to break the food adequately before it enters the stomach. A good rule of thumb, drink your solids, chew your liquids. And so what I mean by that is your food should be chewed up to the point where it's like no longer solid chunks, it's kind of mushy, so that when it gets to the stomach, it's not really in a form anymore. And then when drinking a meal like soup or a smoothie, think about just chewing while you're doing it to kind of slow down that process. So sometimes if I'm having my morning smoothie, I'll take a drink and I'll just chew it a little bit, even though it feels kind of weird because it's a liquid. It just kind of gets your teeth moving and the saliva flowing, and it kind of reminds you to slow down, because those kind of things, soup and smoothies and stuff, are easy to just kind of slam. So it kind of helps you slow down when you're eating foods like that. So tip number 5, once again, as I said, it kind of goes with 3 and 4. But it's mostly that I want you to think about really scheduling your mealtime like you would schedule a meeting with your boss, because it's that important. And sometimes the communication from the brain to the stomach can take up to 20 minutes to let you know you're full. So aiming for like sitting down for a meal for at least 20 to 30 minutes of peaceful time allows your body to, one, actually let all of the organs involved in digestion be online, but also it allows for your body to go, okay, I'm good. I've had enough. I'm full. I can put the fork down instead of overeating. Tip number 6 is eat those healthy proteins. So as we've discussed already, once that mass of food hits our stomachs, that the stretching sensation and the presence of protein tell the body, signal to the body to start making that stomach acid, which, as we know, is super, super important for disinfecting our food, helping break down the food, and also releasing certain nutrients from the food. So also, the stomach must be acidic enough to unlock the door for that food to go into the small intestine. So this last piece is particularly important to remember. So the pyloric valve is what connects the stomach and the small intestine. And that pyloric valve will not open unless it is triggered by the stomach acid being at a certain level. So if you are not producing enough stomach acid, that does not signal the body to then open that pyloric valve up and pass the food down to the small intestine. So basically what happens is it just sits in your stomach and like kind of ferments there until you eat another meal and it's forced through to the small intestine. So this is what can really cause many digestive issues like gas and bloating and that overfeeling of fullness or acid reflux, because that food is just sitting in the stomach and it's not being it's just churning and burning and churning and burning, but it's not becoming acidic enough to be passed to the small intestine for absorption. Okay, tip number 7 is add a little bitter. And what I mean by that is like eating bitter foods like dandelion greens, arugula, Brussels sprouts, grapefruit, coffee, or green tea can all stimulate HCl production or hydrochloric acid, stomach acid production. So drinking a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar mixed with 4 to 6 ounces of water, drinking lemon water, maybe having some digestive bitters. There's a brand called Urban Moonshine that I really like. You can always have these kinds of things like 15 minutes or so before a meal, and that can really encourage stomach acid production. Okay, tip number 8, healthy fats are your friend. So I really want to take a minute on this one because I think that fats have been vilified, especially in the 90s. Everything became low fat and we were told fat was the enemy and that it was going to make us fat. When in reality, the only fat that we should be avoiding are like trans fats and processed fats. But healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, avocados, avocado oil, grass-fed butter, ghee, nuts, nut butter, coconut oil. These are so, so important for our body. And contrary to popular belief, they don't make us fat. In fact, they help our body function better and help us to process things better and absorb better. When it comes to digestion, healthy fats stimulate steady bile flow, and they're also necessary for the absorption of fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which we can only get from food and we can only absorb with the presence of fat. So you don't need a lot, but adding a little to each meal is great for the health of every cell in your body. And then tip number 9, eat the plant rainbow. So you can definitely eat too much protein and fat in a meal where your body has trouble breaking it down at one time. But I am a firm believer that you can never eat too many non-starchy vegetables. And what I mean by that are leafy greens, radishes, fennel, broccoli, cauliflower, tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, celery, onions. All of these different plants bring various vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that the body needs in order to function. Now, as we've talked about a lot on here, every body is different. So you'd obviously want to pay attention to your body. Not all vegetables work for everybody. I have some clients that get an upset tummy with broccoli. I've had clients that get an upset tummy with, tomatoes. So find the ones that feel good to you and eat them all the time, all the different colors. It's just fantastic. An additional hack is to incorporate prebiotic foods into your daily diet. And prebiotics are certain fibers that the body can't digest. So basically they just pass right through the small intestine to your large intestine, where they feed your good gut bugs. So this not only ensures that those flowers in your gut microbiome garden remain strong, but also when our good gut bugs are fed, they make important vitamins and short chain fatty acids and serotonin. So a lot of these prebiotic fibers, which I think I have a list for you, are fantastic for kind of feeding that those good gut bugs in your microbiome. Another thing to note, the weeds in our gut garden, or our bad gut bugs, don't eat fruits and vegetables, healthy proteins, and healthy fats. So when you eat real food, especially plants, you're actually starving the bad gut bugs and ensuring that the majority of your gut garden is made of your good gut bugs, which are your flowers. Okay, so lastly, I have that I'm going to send home with you guys. I have some recipes for success that I will be sending home with you as kind of examples of what I mean by when I say a macronutrient dense diet. And so I'm just going to kind of show these. These are coming home with you guys, so you don't have to write anything down. But here are some examples of when I say macronutrient balanced is what I'm talking about. So, for example, I love avocado toast, but gluten can be a problem for a lot of people and can also be a problem for a lot of digestive issues. And so my version of that is using a sweet potato, like diced sweet potato discs, as the base, like almost like your bread, and then making avocado toast with fried eggs on it. So this is one of my favorite breakfasts, and I always put everything bagel seasoning on it, and it's delicious. And you can also put broccoli sprouts on there, because anything from that cruciferous vegetable family, so broccoli sprouts, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, those cruciferous veggies are fantastic for digestion, but they're also really, really good at shuttling excess hormones and stuff out of the body. So they're just really fantastic. Another one of my favorite go-tos is my power breakfast smoothie. And so you're basically it's a really easy way to get a lot of vegetables in one hit, because you can mask a lot of things when you put a little bit of fruit on top of it and maybe some nut butter. And it's just a great breakfast. All right. So lunch ideas. I have the Peaceful Bellies grain-free burrito bowl. And so instead of rice, I use cauliflower rice, just another way to sneak a vegetable in there. And then you're getting another one of your cruciferous vegetables in there. There's also any meat of your choice. So you're getting, and then the fats, you're getting olive oil, avocados. So you're getting your fats, you're getting your veggies for your carbohydrates, and then you're getting whatever meat or beans you want to put on top as your protein. So you're getting all those fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So that's what I mean by a macronutrient balance. And it's also, when you have all of those things present, it helps sustain your satiety, because oftentimes we'll eat pasta and there's nothing on top of it. So if carbohydrates are they're like putting kindling on a fire, so it's going to burn quick. The fat and the protein are the slow burn. They're like the big logs that you'd put on a fire. And so if you have those present in the meal, it'll sustain you longer, and your energy levels will sustain longer, and you won't have these big blood sugar spikes where you're feeling like oh my God, it's 3 o'clock and I need a nap. You have that sustained energy. Second, we have the empty the fridge salad. I don't know about you guys, but I always have a ton of veggies, and then I'm panicked that they're going to go bad. So I just make the biggest salad I can make with all my extra veggies. So I just kind of put some suggestions in here, but feel free to, empty the fridge salad however you want to do it. And I put a little easy balsamic vinaigrette recipe in here too, that you can make your own, and it takes 2 seconds and it's delicious. Okay. So dinner option, lemon and herb roasted chicken thighs with apple fennel salad. So my husband was never really a big veggie guy. And I remember when I first made this salad and he went, "What the heck is fennel?" And now this is one of his favorite salads. I think the apple just kind of gives it just enough sweet, and it's really fresh and really delicious. So if you've never tried fennel, I encourage you to try it because it's really, really good. And then lastly, we have fish tacos with a pineapple avocado salsa and a side of roasted broccolini. So once again, you're getting your protein with the fish, you're getting the avocado and some, I think I used some grass-fed butter in here to grill the fish. So those are your fats. And then you have your veggies as your carbohydrates. So you're getting your little bit of protein, your little bit of fat, and your carbohydrates in the form of veggies. And then for tortillas, I am gluten-free, so I tend to use these Siete Foods ones, but you can also use regular corn tortillas if that sounds good to you. But just always check those ingredients because they always sneak in things that we can't even pronounce. And so remember, your body doesn't know what that is either if you don't. Thank you so much for listening. I know that was a lot of information, and I hope that you aren't completely and totally overwhelmed.